Okay, so now we are back, and this is the third and final video. This will contain the answers to it, so we're going to go get ahead and get started and progress through the rest of the PowerPoint. So, if you haven't seen the questions, you should go back to video number 2, because we're going to start with the answers. One of the questions was, how accurate is everything in this book? And through my research, I was able to find that before Ed Yong writes any book, he does vigorous research to make sure that all the illustrations he draws and everything he writes down is indeed accurate. And so I found that very interesting, and then I did do more research just to double check and learn more. And then also just the fact that he was born in China, I figured everything would be very accurate because that was his life and that's where he was born into. In regards to the ginkgo nut, I looked it up and I found out that this is a nut that's restricted to special areas just in eastern China, and the uses for the nut were for traditional medicine purposes and spices, and it's also used for treating the kidneys and lungs. And then what I found really interesting was it's very toxic, and so I don't know if this is my personal analysis of this, but I was thinking the children were really smart and they were maybe going to have the wolf eat this nut, and if their whole plan didn't work of the wolf eventually dying from falling from such a high height, if he ate the nut, then he might have died anyways. Then as for the meaning of popo, that was one of my questions. What's the significance of this? Popo in English actually means granny wolf. So popo is Chinese for granny wolf. And then more specifically, if you look up popo, you can see that it means like self-motivated, efficient, resourceful, active, and courageous. And so I thought this went right along with the book, because when you think about the wolf, he does possess these characteristics. He is resourceful. He almost tricks the Red Riding Hood, and in some versions of Red Riding Hood, he does trick them. And then in the pictures, you saw a lot of Chinese elements, like Chinese countryside, the clothing, the names of the 3 children. And after researching all of it is accurate. The clothing is traditional Chinese clothing. The names I already explained about popo. The Chinese countryside, that depiction of the Chinese countryside is very accurate. So speaking of pictures, we're going to move on to the artistry. And this is a huge aspect of the book. And in any review I saw, it talked about the pictures and how great they were and how they make the book. And so I think the artistry is so unique. One big part is the light versus the darkness. And in this picture that I'm about to show you, I think it's really cool because the wolf, as you can see right here, the wolf is more in the dark, and then the children are in the light. And as we know, darkness normally symbolizes evil. And so I think it's cool that the wolf is dark, because I think, in my opinion, the author is depicting that he symbolizes evil, and then the children are seen in the light. Also, just looking at the children's faces, the next point is fear versus courage. You can see in each of the children how fearful they are. And I just think he does such a wonderful job. There's just so many pictures that you could talk about. I think the very last page of the book is awesome because it leaves the reader wondering if this twilight landscape of the cottage, is it the wolf lying beaten and dead on the horizon? Because look, do you see this dark image? So I thought that was awesome. And then if you just look at any of the pictures, in the eyes, you can see the wolf's evilness and darkness in his eyes. If you look into the children's eyes, and then, as I talked about before, the Chinese panels, I think, are awesome. And so this could be the wolf right here between the panels. And then also, here's some more paneling done. And I just think he does a magnificent job. just look at the depiction of the wolf here. He just looks so evil and mean to me. And just everything evokes so many images. When I see the children's faces sometimes when I read the book, in my mind I think, oh, wolf, please don't eat them, because I feel a connection with them. Now we are going to move on how this book has contributed to children's literature. Obviously, any version of Little Red Riding Hood teaches children to not talk to strangers. And so that was a very obvious lesson, moral to the story. But also, through research, I found out that Little Red Riding Hood, the more traditional version, it's said to be a parable of sexual immaturity, which I never thought of. But after reading Folk and Fairy Tale, one of the questions in the book is, what does the red cape symbolize? And as we know, red symbolizes sexuality. And so the thought process behind the fact that the Little Red Riding Hood could be a parable of sexual immorality is that the red cloak symbolizes the blood of menstruation, and then the wolf can be seen as the sexual predator. Moving on, more contributions to children's literature. I think this book serves as an excellent tool to any type of teacher, whether you're college, high school, elementary, middle school, because if you're more high school and college level, you can do a deep analysis of this book and see how it has evolved, because the way it's evolved has actually corresponded to the way our society has evolved. The first versions were aimed at adults. They were scarier. They had harsher language. And this was in the time of our society where children weren't as valued. And now the later versions are beginning to be in a more urban setting, just like how our society has changed from rural to urban. So that's great for more high school and college level. And then for children's level, I think it's great. The diversity in here is awesome. I know Meadowlark Elementary School this year, their theme was international. So I think this book would be a great tool. It can be a great starting point to talk about any culture, you name it. A great way to integrate diversity into the classroom. My opinion on the book, I obviously definitely agree that the moral of the story is don't talk to strangers. It's very obvious no matter what version of Little Red Riding Hood you read. The tale of sexuality, I never saw that in Little Red Riding Hood until I did further research, and I definitely see where people are coming from for it, but when little children read this book, I'm going to highly doubt that that's something they pick up on. The diversity in the book is really important to me because I'm really interested in different cultures, and so I thought it was wonderful, and I thought it was so great how everything in there was actually accurate, and it could just spur so many conversations among children. And it just teaches us, well, everyone is unique. So this person is unique. They have a Chinese name. They're wearing traditional Chinese clothing. And it even teaches us a little bit about their culture, their special type of nut that they use. How it's adapted to the modern world, I think that's great. I can definitely see the connection. I think that's an awesome tool for teachers. And then I definitely agree with the people who have reviewed this book in regards to the imagery. I think Ed Young did an amazing job with the illustrations. I could have gone on and on about them and I could have taken each picture individually and analyzed it, but obviously I can't for the sake of time. And I do agree that some pictures would be scary for young children, so this may be maybe not a kindergarten age group, but more the upper elementary levels. As I've said, diversity is something that is really important to me. And so that might be why a lot of my questions focus on the Chinese aspects of the book. And it just got me thinking about diversity and what other children's books have a lot of diversity, and what are the results of diversity in the classroom? Are there benefits, or is it not beneficial at all? Are there more cons than pros? And so I've done a little research, and I found a lot of diverse children's books. I discovered our own president, Barack Obama, has actually recently written a children's book. It's more of a letter to his two daughters, but it's awesome. It's diverse. It's a great book, and I hope you'll all get to read it. If you end up reading my final paper, there'll be a lot of information about it in there. So my proposed theses is